lunch. This is our final session of our Futures Day today, and we'll be taking a bit of a journey from the south of Australia to Vanuatu and then to the Daly region. So I hope you enjoy what we have in store for you this afternoon. Our first speaker is CoEDL from the University, who will be talking to us about the body part telesystems of southeastern Australia.
I'm going to begin by acknowledging that we're on stolen land here, and as I'm unaware of any legal or legitimate way in which this land was acquired by its current occupiers, I want to acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri and any other First Nations people associated with this place as the rightful owners, as opposed to the traditional owners. I'm going to be talking today about body part tally systems of southeastern Australia, as the slide says. So if anyone's familiar with these body part tally systems, you probably know them from Papua New Guinea or West Papua. Apparently they even have them in the Torres Straits a little bit. But the ones that I'll be talking about today come from southeastern Australia. Mainly Victoria. Is this a touch screen? Clicker. This clicker. Green means go. Wait. Alright, so what are body part tally systems? So, as the slide says, it's a system of temporal diaxis mapped spatially on the human body. What does that mean? The temporal diaxis part is about time, so these are about keeping time. So, and days specifically. So in the Western world and probably in other places, we map time spatially on a calendar. So we have a little piece of paper and each square is a different day. And that's how time is mapped spatially. In Aboriginal groups, people map time spatially, but on the human body. So, and a different body part is given a different day, associated with a different day. So the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth day, and so on and so forth. What were these body part tally systems used for? Were they used for scheduling appointments, making meetings, and those types of things. One of the systems that I'm going to look at today is the final tally point in this system is called, is named for the moon, or one small moon, Kayaputara. And Dawson, who records this system, explicitly draws a comparison with the moon and the phase of the moon and says, you know, the moon's got 28, 29 days in its cycle, and therefore there's 28 or 29. He says 28, but there's really 29 points in this system. Which then raises the question of to what extent were people constantly counting or observing this system in a month? So like when people, you know, when there's a new moon, you start again and you're always counting through. So instead of, you know, we have the third of the month, did people have the elbow of the month, you know? That's one of the questions I can't really answer. But it's interesting nonetheless. Okay, so these systems, they aren't used anymore anywhere in southeastern Australia, so we only know about them from the historical record. We have accounts for the Wujibolic, which are a group from Western Victoria, and that comes from Howard, and we have an account also from Howard for the Wurundjeri, which are the people of Melbourne. We have another account from William Thomas, the Aboriginal protector, and it's from Melbourne, but he worked mainly with Bunwurrung people from down near Port Phillip, and this system differs from the one recorded for the Wurundjeri, so it might actually be a Bunwurrung system. We've got two accounts from James and Isabella Dawson. For the Japurung, which is another Western Kulin language, it's in a dialectal relationship with Wujibolic. And for the Kernkoppernot, which is a dialect or part of the Bunda-Jamara language family. For those 5 examples, we have a more complete record. We have all the body part places specified and all the names associated with these body part places. We have 2 more accounts that come from Ker for the Bangarang, which are another name for Yorta Yorta or maybe Pada Yorta Yorta. And then we have another account of the Buandik or the Bungadij that come from Mount Gambier. And that comes from a fellow named Stewart, and that's recorded in a different book of Ker's. For them final 2, we don't have a complete record. We only have a brief outline of the tally points. And for Bangarang, we only have the first 2 tally points named. And for the Buandik, we have no names for the tally points. And when I check the Bangarang with the other Bangarang Yorta Yorta records, the words don't match up. There is one more account that comes from George Augustus Robinson. It's just a brief mention of the systems in Western Victoria, and I haven't included it here. This is the location of the systems. I kind of summarised this already. Up the top on the Murray River there, that's the Bangarang Yorta Yorta. In the west, that's the Bungadij, Mount Gambier mob. So it's almost a Victorian thing, but it just crosses a little bit into New South Wales and into South Australia. So today's presentation is going to be broken up into 2 parts. The first part, I'm going to talk about the sequences that are used in these body part tally systems, because we can sort them into 4 different types. And then in the second part, I'm going to talk about a few of the terms that are used. Alright, type 1. So if you know these systems from Papua, this might look familiar to you. It's a symmetrical system. It's recorded by Howard for the Wujibolic and Wurundjeri. There's slight differences between the Wujibolic and Wurundjeri, but they basically follow the same pattern, beginning on the pinky, coming up to a central point, and then coming down the other side. Type 2. This is the system that was recorded for the Japurung and the Kernkoppernot by Dawson. This is an asymmetrical system. It consists firstly of a symmetrical system which resembles the previous one that we just saw, starting on this spot here, the place between the thumb and the forefinger. Then it travels up the head to a central point, comes down symmetrically, and then it finishes with the fingers of both hands. And finally it finishes on the pinky. These are one that has the word for the moon, Kayak Bundaru, underscore moon. Okay, number 3. This is the one from the Bangarang, which was recorded by Kerr, and for the Buandik or Bungadij of Mount Gambier. This is an asymmetrical system, and it's got tally points down one side, and then it finishes with the fingers of both hands. Note that it starts on the ear. And for this one, as I was saying, Kerr doesn't explicitly state the sequence of the fingers. So we can't know if it starts on the pinky and runs across to the pinky, or if it starts on the thumb and runs across to the thumb. And we can't assume that it was like the previous example, number 2, which started on the pinky, which I'll tell you why we can't assume that correctly. So the last type, this is from William Thomas, and this is, again, an asymmetrical system. It starts off with a little symmetrical system, which goes over the head. It starts on the ear, but this time it goes over the head, and then it goes down the arm. And the final two tally points are the thumb, and then the forefinger. So we're getting the reverse pattern of number 2, which started on the pinky, which is why we can't assume for number 3 that it starts on the pinky. All right. Now I'm going to move on and talk about some of the terms that are used in these systems. The first one is the word for thumb, which is mother of the hand. Now, I think this is a common kind of semantic pattern. I know in Pindala they say mama marang, the father of the hand. That's the word for thumb. In Wurundjeri, we've got the same thing. So manya is the word for hand. Oh, here it's mother, not father. Manya is the word for hand, and bap is the word for mum. So we've got bap, manya. The first Wurundjeri example, we got bap and manya, but it looks like there could be some morphology there. I'm not sure what that is. Then we got the Wujubole, bap, manya, the Jakburu, bap, manya, and the Kerkopanut, Ngirang Marang. And, you know, people would recognize marang for hand. What's interesting about this one is that all the words are used twice, right? So elbow is used twice. On the way up, you say elbow, and on the way down, you say elbow. And you have to differentiate what place it is in the sequence by gesture. So if it's this elbow, like number probably 4, you touch that side. If it's this elbow, probably number 15, 16, you touch this side and say elbow. For the word, remember I said for type 2, the first spot was the space between the thumb and the forefinger? That is also called Ngirang Mara, mother of the hand, and that's the first place. And then you come all the way over, you get to this one, there's another Ngirang Mara, mother of the hand. And then you go through the fingers, you get to the thumb, there's another Ngirang Mara, mother of the hand, and then a fourth Ngirang Mara. So we've got the same word used 4 times in this system, and it's the gesture which differentiates its place in the sequence. All right. This is a photo of some Kulin people from Port Phillip Bay. Bunwurrung people probably. We don't know their names. They weren't recorded. This is often the case at this time, or that time. And one interesting thing about this photo is this is the oldest photo of any Aboriginal people in Australia, 1847. And I'm showing you this because some of the words that are used in these body part tally systems are not actually the name of the body part, but the name of a cultural implement or ornament associated with that body part. So the 3 things I want you to take notice of in this picture are 1, the possum skin armlet going around his bicep. 2, the reed necklace around his neck. And the 3rd thing is the headband. I said these are Bunwurrung people. Thomas worked with the Bunwurrung. These could even be the people that Thomas worked with. At the same time, these could be the people that gave him the Bunwurrung system. Okay, so the first cultural ornament thing I'm going to talk about is the place of the possum armlet. Now we got the Melbourne and Wurundjeri, we got the same word there, and I've got Wurt, I've regularized that and isolated it as a separate kind of morpheme or segment, and that why I've done that will come will become more clear when I move on to the next slide. We've got the Bruggeman example, which we're lucky that Howard actually tells us what this word means, and he says it means to tie up the arm. And when we check with other sources like Louise Hercus's work on Wagaya, we can confirm this, and kankan means to tie, and tajak is the arm. Then we jump over to Japurung, which is in a dialectal relationship to Wujibolic, and we might assume that the same word occurs there. And we find in the Japurung corpus this same word, but in the body part tali system, it's this other word, and I can't crack this one, I don't know what it means. And Dawson doesn't say. Move on to the Kern Copper Nut example, we got Millet work. This one, again, Dawson doesn't say, but we can isolate work, and that means arm. So comparing it with the Wujibolic one, we might start to think, well, Millet must mean to tie up. And I was searching through and I couldn't find the word for tie up in Kern Copper Nut, but in the neighbouring dialect, Pipurung, we get this word Mulatin Bim. And that refers to the headband. And Bim is head. And that got me thinking maybe the Mulutin part is about tying up or wrapping around, and Millet and Mulu are related words. Okay, next one. This is the reed necklace. I'll jump over the top two and go down to the Wujibolic. Again, we're lucky because Howard tells us what these mean. And he says that Jark is the reed and Gurn is the neck. And then we look at Japurung, we find the same thing. That's obviously Jark Gurn, with maybe some kind of retraction. And then Kern Copper Nut, we get Dark Gurn because then we've got an interdental. And then we jump up to the top one and we can see Gurn, the neck. And we got this bird shape again. So, is Red going to take me back? Yeah. Okay. So then we got bird. Here we've got this bird again. And these are the only two examples of this word recorded. So it looks to me like bird is the same thing. It's used maybe in these ones, something to do with tying up the arm. And then we got it here, something to do with tying up the neck. Wujong, that is the end. That's been a brief overview of the body part tally systems found in southeastern Australia. And a look at the different sequences used in those systems. And a brief look at some of the language terms.
One thing that was quite striking about your presentation is that the use of these is for ordinals, right, like the third or the fifth or whatever, whereas the body part counting in terms I'm familiar with in, say, Papua New Guinea, they're mostly cardinals, like, this many yams or this many whatevers. Do these tally systems also get used for tallying up objects or people?
Yeah, awesome. So I didn't know what the Papuan ones were like, whether they were cardinal or ordinal. These ones, at least for the Kern Copper Nut and the Japurung, which Dawson records, are not. And he explicitly gives this system of counting, which is an ordinal system, and then he gives another system, which is a cardinal system. And the cardinal system uses the words that we're probably more familiar with. It's got kayak, and then pulaj, and then pulamia, and then tabus, bulaj for 4, then marang for 5, and it continues on all the way up to 10. And then it gets to, like if you want to, then 10, 2, that's 2 hands then, bulaj marang. And then if you want to say 13, he says that they do this through a combination of speech and gesture. So they'll say bulaj marang, which is the 10 part. If you want to say 13, they'll say bulaj marang and hold up 3 fingers. So, no, there's a cardinal and ordinal. Thank you.
Thank you. Super interesting. So, is in this report, this historical record, is there any indication of the use of this markings for calculation, not just for enumerating and designating an amount, but for actually performing some kind of calculation? And following a little bit of Nick's question, is there any indication in the record that this was used for different kinds of things, not just, let's say, time or days? And then if I can fit in a quick question, any indication of what was the elicitation methods that used? Do these people describe how they gained that information, or how much was their interpretation, or any indication like that? Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Good question. Firstly, I don't think they are used for mathematical addition and all these kind of computations, and that's because they're more ordinal numbering systems, whereas I think the kind of maths and stuff is in the cardinal system, at least for Dawson. What was the second question?
Answer next.
Oh, are there? I don't think so. I'm not sure.
Sorry, you don't think so? What?
I don't think there's other ordinal uses
for
days. I think it's only for days. At least that's only what's indicated in the historical record. And the fact that some of them are tied to the moon makes me think that it's really connected to days. And how were they elicited? So, Dawson and his daughter Isabella, they lived in Camperdown for 40 years and lived with the Japuru Coconut people from the 1840s through to the 1880s. Dave Dawson is a good fellow. Read him up, read about him. There's a lot of stuff about him and his relationships with the Aboriginal people there. He even put up a big monument when one fellow died, and they buried him in a paddock. When he got his body put in the cemetery, put up a big monument. So I think they had a good relationship with those people. He says that his daughter learned the languages and could speak them. So I think over this 40-year time, he slowly elicited and learned. You've probably seen these, I'm speculating. Howard, I'm not sure. He was more doing research in a lot of different places. Kerr, he lived again with the Bangarang for a long time. And he's got a whole book about them. And Stuart, his mother, also lived with the Boondik people for a long time and learned to speak the language and wrote a grammar on Boondik. So I think in some cases there was a long exposure and they might have hopefully reported it accurately. Thank you.
We have time for one more question, a quick one.
Thanks, Corey. Apart from just the terms on their own, do the documentation also show it being used in like example sentences and that kind of thing?
Sadly, no. There's just a list of all the terms. But some of the terms are also repeated in the, like the word for hand or for thumb, that's also in the word list, but not in any example sentences.
please join me in thanking Corey for his presentation.